The Nigerian Exchange Group has unveiled a groundbreaking new digital platform that promises to revolutionize public offerings and right issues in the country's capital market. Named NGX Invest, this innovative solution has received the seal of approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission, paving the way for a more efficient, convenient, and seamless experience for managing primary market transactions. According to the group, the launch of the NGX Invest represents a significant leap forward in improving stakeholders' experience within Nigeria's capital market. What more do we need to know about this initiative? Let's get talking. And I have the right person. Is the Group Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of the NGX Group, Mr. Temi Popoola. Good afternoon, Mr. Popoola, and thank you so much for joining the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yes. Now, NGX Group recently unveiled the NGX Invest, a digital platform to aid distribution of public offers and right issues. Why did the NGX Group invest in this, and was this platform specifically designed for the ongoing capital raises by Nigerian banks?
Thank you very much for the question. I think let me address the question by taking a step back as to the journey that led us here. You would be aware that the exchange has been a very, very good, I would say, strong consumer of technology for several years. I usually remind people during COVID, for example, where it was almost 3 years where the exchange was trading remotely and there was not a single day of downtime. If you go back in time, even before I joined the exchange, you'd see a very strong approach at innovation, at consuming tech. When you also look at our wider ecosystem, we have very strong intermediaries, very strong stakeholders, also who consume technology. So I say that to say that the journey that has led us here is not just perhaps with myself and the current crop of leadership at the exchange, but it's one that builds on the work, very hard, good work that have been laid before our time. Now, how did we get here and why are we here? I think if you think through the fact that, as has been said, I think quite numerous times, the real demography of our nation is a young population. And you would find that that population is not very well represented on the capital markets. Now, how do you attract that population? How do you reach them? Of course, it's through technology. It's through the ability for them to consume your product on their mobile devices, to consume that electronically. So we've been on this journey for quite some time. We're very privileged that, all of that work is now coming to fruition now. It is a coincidence that it's happening at the same time as the capital raising efforts of the banks. Of course, it's a very good coincidence. We welcome it very much because all of a sudden we have a scenario now where the banks are able to connect, I think, in a way directly, and millions of customers at the end of those mobile phones with bank accounts, now directly through to the capital market with our intermediaries. It's a very welcome development.
Oh, it's a great way to start this conversation, really. And let's now look at how this platform will support NGX's modernization of the Nigerian capital market infrastructure. And how will this platform again operate alongside other digital investment technology like the online brokerage platforms in the market?
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. So first and foremost, this complements any digital solution you can think about, whether that is digital solutions by brokerage companies. This would complement them. They would be given APIs and connections to this application. It would complement any other digital thing you can think about. I spoke about the banks earlier, and there's so much more. You can expand the frontier subject to regulatory approval, right? Where you could actually expand this to any corporation, as it were, that consumes technology. This might force us, as innovation usually does, to go back to our rules and the laws that govern our markets and see if you can expand that. Now, what does this really do? It solves quite a few problems. One of the challenges you find as to why capital markets are not as deep in our country as they should be is really because there's a lot of barrier to capital. Today, traditionally, if you went through how capital is raised, typically through paper, it would involve a lot of manual processes, lots of phone calls, lots of forms to fill, and then many times physically trying to wire money to the bank and going somewhere to pay and to show proof of payment. Today, we have a solution that in seconds, you can actually make payment for an offer. In less than 2 minutes, you can actually invest, whether you're an existing investor or you were a first-time investor in the capital markets in Nigeria, you have a very seamless, user-friendly, shall I say, enjoyable experience to actually get that done. So when you start to look at some of these teething problems, the access to capital, the barriers to entry, the ability to attract a younger demography, the upwardly mobile, as it were, you start to see all of these dots start to connect for the broader good of the markets.
The platform also currently supports investing in primary market instruments. Well, my question really would be, are there plans to expand that scope, maybe into secondary market securities in the future?
Simple answer to that is no. No. There is very strict regulation that governs what we do in our industry, what we do as an exchange. Today, those rules only allow us to do this around the primary markets. I think that also when you look at our secondary markets, we have very strong intermediaries in that space, and we just want to make sure that everything we do while we try to catalyze the markets also is in line with an approach that creates value for everyone. So for now, it is strictly primary market in nature, rights issuances, public offers, initial public offers, those sorts of things.
Let's now look at economic impacts that we can expect from the NGX Invest. How will the adoption of NGX Invest drive economic growth and stability?
Thank you very much also for that question. So first and foremost, if you go back to what capital markets do, we serve as a basis for corporates to raise capital. One, you want to make sure that there is access to capital. Two, you want to make sure that it's cheap access to capital as well, and that capital is also as broad-based, as deeply entrenched as possible so that it's sticky capital. So when you look at what we've put together from that lens, you start to see a very positive picture. So all of a sudden, if you think through anyone who has a bank account today, who is on a mobile device, who's on the web interface, you can start to think through the millions of potential Nigerians that we can distribute securities to. You think through Nigerians in diaspora also, for example, as long as they're able to connect, they have accounts, you can start to think about the multiplier effect from that perspective. You think also potentially about financial inclusion. When you have solutions like this, you expect that this also spurs more primary raising activity. We're looking forward to a future where on the back of a platform like this, there will be companies to raise capital that excites people. People actually then become a bit more included as a result of that. Now, when you step away from that, you then come to also what we've tried to do historically, getting closer and closer to the technology ecosystem as well, where you've seen a history of just private capital raising from that perspective, right? The closer with tools like this and technologies like this, you find a bit more adoption also from that perspective. So I think you're starting to see a scenario where, capital can be raised not just through the boundaries of this country, but that can be done externally. You see a scenario where you can pull in different and newer forms of capital, and then also the existing forms of capital as well. You make that easier. The final point I should make on this is that also the solution we've put together, it does not preclude people who still would prefer perhaps to go through what we call the traditional method. You like to call your broker, pick up a phone, you have legacy relationships. That also works. That broker then has an opportunity to just digitize that interaction through the system also relatively easily, upload a file, and all that just goes to the pool of the book. And then finally, of course, also is that for the wider ecosystem, our intermediaries, our advisors, the registrars, through tech, a lot of their work becomes cheaper, a lot of their work becomes a lot more efficient as well. And overall, all of this leads to a much stronger capital market, which much better economic impact for the country.
All right, there. Before I let you go, of course, just an overview of the performance of the market. What more today? Inflation is out. Many say economic issues are also affecting the pattern or the shape of the market. What can you say around this, and what more should you be expecting from the NGX moving on to make, of course, the market more attractive to other companies to be able to come in?
Okay, thank you very much. I think from my perspective as the group CEO, the lens that we take is, I think, a more broader lens. How do we have markets, in Nigeria and our business, right, that really has several verticals that drive around the central topic that you have asked, right? So ultimately, it's a few things. One, we've spent a lot of time on this call speaking to how do you drive more capital That helps the broader macro. It helps some of these indices that you have just spoken to. But then away from that, you see some of the activity we've done. We've made investments outside Nigeria, for example, into a few other exchanges across the continent. We've gone into also very strong partnerships with a few players and a few partners around sustainability. We see all of this hopefully coming back, right to the heart of our markets, stronger markets. I try not to forecast market direction. It's anyone's guess in that perspective. But if we get the basics right, deeper markets, more retail investors, connected through technology, easy access to risk capital, you break the frontiers and barriers and boundaries, across the continent, find ways to attract foreign capital. I think all of that should give us a lot more robust market.
I must thank you so much, Mr. Temi Pokbola. There, he's the Group Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer, NGX Group. Do have a great week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and you too. Thank you for having me.